Let's see how ChatGPT did with these questions.
Let's see.
Okay, the first question, Bob, can you start by telling us about your entry into commercial real estate? What drew you to this business?
Serendipity, I
Yeah.
would say. I've been on a lot of podcasts and talked about it a lot, Ken, but I got into the business completely by accident. So I'll take you back to 1981. I'm a freshman at the Wharton School. Want to be the next Gordon Gekko, like every other Wharton kid. I grew up in northern Jersey, so spring break that freshman year, I'd drive around with my resume, dropping it off at every commercial bank and investment bank I saw. I came out of a Payne Weber office, and across the hall, I see Coldwell Banker. And I said, oh, great, another bank. Let me go in, drop my resume off. So I dropped my resume off. They called me later that day and set up an interview for the following day. So this is 1981. There's no internet. So I go to the library to look up this bank because I didn't know anything about it. I see it's a real estate company. I'm like, oh, shit, I don't want to get into real estate. But they were the only ones hiring college kids for the summer. So I took the job. I was doing market research, driving around Morris County, writing down information on every commercial building I saw. I loved the job. It was an office full of hardworking, energetic folks. Seemed like they were having a good time, making good money. It's very happy. And I went back my next 2 summers. The second summer, I actually ran that summer internship program for them. And then my third summer, I got my New Jersey salesperson's license and was an assistant to a broker showing industrial space. So I then wanted to go work in the city. So I started with CB in Manhattan when I got out of school in 1984, and that was my start. It's a total accident, but so happy that it worked out that way because it is a job that I'm very, very passionate about. I love the business, and I always tell people I feel lucky because selling buildings is not only my career, it's my hobby also.
So when you got started, you had graduated in 1981, so you're a millennial, right?
I don't know whether I think I'm a baby boomer. I'm not quite sure.
So did you get married? Did you have children? I mean, where did that all begin?
That was much later in life. I got married about 17 years ago. We have a 14-year-old daughter. So early on, it was a lot of work, a lot of working hours.
Yeah.
7 days a week for quite a while, and still kind of is 7 days a week with technology the way it is today. But the early days at CB were interesting, and had a lot of elbow grease, a lot of hours, and
Yeah.
it was a very different world back then.
So for people in this room that are maybe in the first third of their career and they're getting started, I hear you said that you worked hard. How do you learn a market? How do you upskill coming in? I mean, you had a great degree, but you had to learn the business. What advice would you have?
Yeah, well, I think the degree really didn't help all that much.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of what's taught in college doesn't really prepare folks for life in the business world. I think that there's a lot of things like human behavior, likability, persuasion, lots of things that folks can learn that would really help them in life. Because we're all, unless you're an inventor or you're a computer programmer, you're dealing with people all the time. So I think personal skills, interpersonal relationship skills is really, really important. But I would say starting out to learn a market, you want to become a market expert. I think number one, specialize in something. I think if you read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he's fantastic thing in there that he says that the difference between good companies and great companies is that great companies figure out the one thing that they can do better than anyone else in the world. And every decision they make, everything they do is geared towards achieving that objective. And, I think that in real estate, you try to become an expert at something, you specialize. That specialization allows you to develop an expertise. That expertise allows you to differentiate yourself from other people. And that differentiation creates a competitive advantage. And that's what we're all looking for, is a competitive advantage. So I think understanding the market, knowing how many buildings are in your market, what the turnover rate is, what the prices per square foot is, what those have been trending over a period of years. Those are things that enable you to set yourself apart.
One of the things I've admired about you, Bob, and I've heard you say this before, is when people, you're very specific. You know your market, you know how many deals you've done. And I've heard you say at a cocktail party, when someone asks you how the market is, you give them real stats, don't you? You don't just say it's great or some aphorism.
Yeah, no, Rod and I talk about this all the time. As brokers, the most frequently asked question you're going to get is, how's the market?
Right.
And 99% of folks will answer that with adjectives.
Yes.
I answer, since you asked, how's the market? Well, first half of, and this is for the Manhattan market, the first half of the year, there have been sales that put the market on pace for about 518 transactions this year. That's a turnover rate of 1.8% of the total stock of the 27,649 buildings that exist in Manhattan, south of 96th Street. That's down 20% from last year and down 74% from the all-time record, which was 1,200 sales in 2012. The dollar volume's on pace for $15.8 billion this year, which would be down 27% from last year, down 37% from where it was in 2019, and down 72% from where it was at the peak of the market in 2015. So, and I could go on and on.
Can we give him a round of applause for that? So I'm going to say the tweet is, when you're asked how the market is, don't answer with an adjective, answer with facts, right?
I think you answer with facts, and then you can have the listener draw their own conclusion about how the market's doing. If I tell you that the volume's down 20%, some of you may think that's horrible. Some of you may not think it's that bad. But and I think it demonstrates expertise, that you know your market, you know what you're doing, and I think it's a very productive way to answer that question.
Perfect. Let's talk about one of the biggest things that happened in our generation, which is COVID. And I've heard you talk about this before. You took a very different approach than many business professionals during that period. Tell us what you did during COVID.
Yeah, well, the COVID experience for me was really interesting. I learned a lot, but I remember going home on March 12th, I guess, and we were told, go home for a couple of weeks, and this will all blow over. You flatten the curve or whatever, and then you come back. And I got a call that night from my doctor, and he said, hey, Bob, I understand there's a rumor going around they're going to shut the city down. They're going to shut the bridges and tunnels. You're not going to be able to leave the city. Get up to your country house right away. So within an hour, I had my family in the car, and we're driving up to the country house, and left very quickly. And 3 weeks later, it was very clear we weren't going to go back. So we weren't going to go back to work. So I had to go back into the city to get some stuff that we left behind, and drive in. It was like a science fiction movie. There was nobody walking around, no cars on the street. Every store was closed. And one of the things I had always wanted to do was actually walk around the city and count all the buildings under construction, because a big part of my practice is the sale of development sites. And in order to value development sites properly, you need to know what the pipeline looks like. How many buildings are under construction? What's the stock going to be coming to market that's going to compete with this to-be-built building? And remarkably, there's not a lot of data on that. The most robust data set that exists, every residential firm produces a condominium report, how many condos are coming to the market, but yet each of those reports is very different, because some count some things that others don't. And with respect to rental apartments, hotels, and office buildings, there's virtually nothing in terms of what the pipeline is like. So for 10 years, I wanted to go out and do this. But as I'm driving into the city, and it's this ghost town, I'm like, you know what? This is a great opportunity to get out there and go look at every building. So called up my team. I said, hey, guys, make copies of the Sanborn. We have these Sanborn tax lot maps. that have the parameters of every parcel on them. And I said, make copies of those things. We're going to bring them out in the field with a bunch of highlighters and mark them up. So we spent about 4 months driving to a place, get out of the car, park the car in the middle of the street because nobody was around, and went around, and every property that was under construction I highlighted in green. Every building that was built to about less than 25% of its maximum density I highlighted in orange. Assemblage sites where you could acquire a number of adjacent buildings to knock them down to make a piece of land I highlighted in yellow. And we had these sections of the map, and then all of a sudden I taped them all together, and now my map is 24 feet long and 10 feet wide. Since we finished that process, which is about 220 hours in the field, we've done thousands of hours of research looking at each of these things. And so we've developed an unbelievably accurate pipeline divided into 5 major food groups: residential rentals, condos, hotels, office, and then a miscellaneous bucket that has everything that doesn't fit into the first 4, which are retail properties, education, healthcare, that kind of stuff. So that's really helped us in doing the valuations on the properties that we're doing BOVs on these days. We've also, during that time, we started working on a land index, which will be coming out with the Knakal Land Index shortly, which will look at land comparable sales, and we have them disaggregated into those 5 buckets, and we have that data going all the way back to 1984. And we're going to, remarkably, I'm happy my cell phone goes on in the morning, I'm going to apply an AI application to all that data to see if we can come up with some predictive thing. So we're going to take the fluctuation in land values and compare them to the different rental rates in each of those sectors, but also interest rates, lending rates, rate of inflation, S&P 500, Dow Jones Industrial Average, price of gold, consumer sentiment, every economic metric out there. And think about how powerful that would be if we find that when the price of eggs go up 10%, that's going to impact the land value in 2 years. Maybe there's some correlation, maybe there's not, but this is the kind of stuff that you can do. And I think with AI, I think that the effectiveness of it in a predictive way is highly correlated to the integrity of the data that goes into it. So what you put in is what you're going to get out. So this data set we have, we feel really good about the integrity of the data, and so we'd be very interested to see what it spits out.
Well, I think first of all, that's terrific and a great lesson that to be a true deep market expert never goes out of style. And I know people, when they ring you up and they hear you talk, know how much of an expert you are. But you've been taking it a step further. You created a map room. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the map room was created out of necessity, not an idea, out of a necessity, because this map is huge. So I figured, how am I going to get this thing around? I can't fold it up. So I got a closet rod, and I taped the end of the map to the closet rod, and I would roll it up. And I was carrying this thing around the city, which, how do you do that? And I was going to a client's office with it one day, and it starts to rain. And I'm like, oh, God, my map's going to get wet. I've got some garbage bags putting on both ends. I'm like, this is crazy. I can't do this anymore. So, I looked within JLL if there was room to lay it out. And even our biggest conference room wouldn't accommodate the map. So I said, you know what the heck? I've seen developers put together showrooms when they're going to build a condo and have folks come over and look at the models. I said, I'm going to go rent the space, get some tables, lay the thing out, and make a development site sales center. So we call it the Knakal Map Room, and I tell you, it is a client magnet. Every client wants to be there. We spend hours looking at the map. I'm learning something every time somebody comes in. They say, oh, by the way, I was just offered this deal, or, hey, I'm a partner in that one. And so every time someone comes in, the highlighters are out, and we're modifying the map, and it's a tremendous learning experience for me. but it also demonstrates the level of information we have. And it's been a real differentiator. I'll tell you that over the course of my career, my success rate on pitches is about 26%. In the map room so far, I'm 9 for 9.
Congratulations. That's amazing. And I think the brilliance of that is it demonstrates your expertise. It allows you to have real-time conversations that you didn't plan. But it's also very visual. A lot of us in this business are visual people. And so you can have the database in your phone, but you put it on the wall. So
Yeah, and people have been after me to digitize this thing. And I don't want to do it for a couple of reasons. One is that then it can kind of get out into the domain.
yeah,
Now there's only one. But also, it's kind of sensory overload for folks when they walk into that room, because not only do I have the map laid out on the table, I have individual sections of the map duplicated on boards that I can bring to a client's office,
yeah.
but they're all over the walls. So you're in this place and you're like, wow, look at this. And I'm telling you, the biggest developers in town have been in there and they're just looking intently at everything because there's so much information there. It's been a great thing.
So you're starting again in your career, is what you said yesterday, and you had an unusual pivot for someone at your age and stage. I guess in January, you got involved in social media. Why'd you do that?
Peer pressure. Like I said yesterday, peer pressure. People were after me, Bob, you have to get on social media. It's such a great thing. And I'm like, oh, come on, give me a break. Who's going to be looking at this stuff? And they're like, no, you have great stories to tell. You should give it a try. And so finally I just said, you know what, I'll give it a shot. I'll try it for 3 months, see what happens. And I've just been completely blown away by it. The reach, the relationships, the connectivity. We talk about market presence all the time, and Rod is always beating into my head, come on, market presence, market presence. It's another great way to have market presence. And, in my world, I think in the investment sales world, there are two sectors of it. One is the institutional world. And if you think about it, the very biggest companies, there are 40 companies that own probably half the real estate in the U.S., and those companies have, if they have 10 decision makers, that's 400 people that the institutional sales world has to get in touch with and get to know. In New York City alone, there's 250,000 people that have an ownership interest in real estate. I think I'm a pretty good cold caller. I can't cold call 250,000 people. So that gets to the heart of why I always say, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And in order to have people know you, market presence is such a key component of that. And I think social media is just such a great way to get people to know you.
So we talked yesterday about on that panel about how you do it and how you schedule it during the week. But from your chair and your perspective, so not necessarily nuts and bolts, but sort of zooming out, what's your philosophy in social media? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to convey through your messaging?
I think just sharing experiences. We have kind of a theme daily, and Mondays like to do some motivational things. And, I think that one of the things that I really enjoy is trying to share things with folks, inspire them, motivate them. And so I think some of the experiences that I've had that have worked out well, I want to share with people. That's why I love to tell the deal stories also, to give kind of the behind the scenes look at how deals unfolded or what worked well, what might not have worked so well. So I think it's just kind of letting folks have a insight into how I've done things and what's worked and what hasn't worked and that kind of thing. So it's just basically sharing with people. And I learn a lot from social media, also following many of you. And, I think it's been very accretive to my practice.
Well, I would say on behalf of everyone, we appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate you being here. You're doing a fantastic job. I have one more question for you. You've been through probably 4 or 5 downturns in your career, and there's a lot of bad news. I mean, we heard a very factual but unfortunate report from the expert yesterday from CoStar. It's a scary time in the market. But can you help us get perspective? If I'm in the business today and I'm 5 years in and I'm scared, give me some perspective about the market.
Okay, well, the thing that I can say that should give everybody some hope and some calm is that, the market is like any other market. It's cyclical. Always has been, is, and always will be cyclical, and it will come back. There's no doubt about it. So I think that, from my perspective, the toughest time ever for me was going through the savings and loan crisis in the early 90s. That was really, really bad. Much worse than I think we've seen so far in this cycle. But each cycle kind of unfolds differently, and what we're seeing, and my perspective, again, is just very New York centric. I don't do anything outside of New York, but I know that this cycle in New York is very different in two fundamental ways from past cycles. And the other cycles we're talking about, the S&L crisis, early 90s, the recession in the early 2000s, the GFC. And I think the two main differences I see is that in this cycle, which I think, I'm trying to figure out, Ken, whether we're in the second of back-to-back down cycles, or this is one long cycle that started in October of 2015. We tangibly knew the market was changing in the first couple of weeks of October when we saw the land market. All of a sudden, bids on land we were getting were 15-20% below what we were expecting, and the hotel market cap rates were up 75 to 100 basis points almost overnight. Those two sectors are very indicative of shifts in the market, because hotels, because leases are for one day, and land, because land is a proxy for what developers believe market conditions are going to be like 3 or 4 years from today, when what they're buying is going to be built and come to the market. So we kind of knew the music had stopped. From October of 15 through February of 2020, the market was in correction mode. The dollar volume of sales had dropped by 56%. Number of properties sold was down by 54%. Values were down only about 10 to 12% if you aggregate all the property types. And then COVID comes along and converts what was mostly a volume correction into a value correction. And 2020, it definitely bottomed. And then there was a tangible shift in the market. In the first week of April, I was contacted by 13 private equity shops within a 3-day period saying, Bob, we've been on the sidelines. We want to get back into the market. I'm like, why the heck is this happening? And as it turns out, all the residential firms had printed their first quarter 21 reports, and it showed upward pressure on residential rents for the first time in years. Condo absorption was good. And sure enough, we had a very, very good second half of 2021 and first half of 22. Fed starts raising interest rates in March. The interest rate increases really didn't tangibly impact the market until August or September. But then it started to exert downward pressure on prices again. So is this a long correction that started in October of 15 and we had a 12-month break from it? Or is this the second correction? But the two biggest changes in this whole period from other corrections is lender behavior is one, and the way different property types are performing is another. And I think during the S&L crisis, banks went through a 2 or 3 year foreclosure process, took title, sold the REO. It was great for brokers. They hired brokers exclusively to sell everything. It was a great time. And then in the early 2000s, lenders didn't want to go through that 2 or 3 year foreclosure process. So they would sell notes, and they hired brokers to sell notes. Same thing happened in GFC. They were selling paper, hiring brokers to do that. Today, lenders are doing things much more quietly. And I think part of it is with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature going down, I think they're afraid of airing their problems publicly. So a lot of deals are being made directly with the bank, going to one of their one of their clients selling a note at a discount or doing extensions. But it's has not been great for the brokerage community, the lender behavior up to this point. And the other big difference is that different property types are performing differently. Like I think in New York today, retail is a bright spot, but retail had been getting hammered for 6 years. Rents finally stopped going down, leasing volume is picking up. We're getting investor calls for retail for the first time in a long time. The multifamily market has significant political headwinds, but demand is robust for multi. Land, it really depends which sector you're talking about, but I can tell you condo land, which is most of what we sell, is down 20 to 30% just in the past year because construction loan pricing has gotten so expensive. And then the office market, which is probably the most challenged sector of the market, probably has at least another couple of years before that's going to turn around. But each of the sectors is performing differently. So again, history repeats itself, but it's a saying, it rhymes, but it's a little different. So it's performing very differently.
Some takeaways. If I were 5 years in the business, I've heard you talk about market expertise that you enhanced during COVID. So if you got some time, study the market, and then you said elbow grease, you worked really hard. And I think hard work produces, dollars in the wallet eventually. So you just got to hang on and persist through. I wouldn't bet against our economy because you're right, cycles come and cycles go, but there are cycles. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting. One of the things that we've seen is some reluctance on behalf of buyers to pull the trigger today. And the wealthiest of the investors we deal with have routinely said, yeah, Bob, that sounds like a good deal, but it's going to be cheaper in 3 months. And what I've said to them is, okay, I hear you, but we'll only know we're past the bottom probably 6 or 9 months after we're out of the bottom.
right.
And so the opportunity is lost. And if you look at the GFC, property values in New York bottomed out in the second half of 2010. I said, did you buy anything in 2009? And isn't everybody that bought in 2009 happy doing cartwheels down Park Avenue that they bought at a 2009 price? You can't time the market perfectly. And so I think we're starting to see some traction, and I think activity is going to pick up. And again, take heart. The market is going to come back. I guarantee. I don't know when, but it definitely will.
That's awesome. Well, it's wonderful to have someone of your stature here at our conference. And so we're going to do something a little different. You have some thoughts to share with us about success and how to be successful. So we're going to conclude in a second this fireside chat. We're going to take the chairs down and then give you the mic. But let's give Bob Knakal a round of applause. Thank you. Well done. All right. So give us just a second to transition. I don't know if the crew's going to come up and get the chairs, Jamie. Okay.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts, observations, and some things that may be of interest to you. So, success and winning in the commercial real estate business is not a matter of life and death. It's much more important than that, right? And that's a quote attributed to a guy who was the head coach of the Liverpool football team in England. And I think that when you look at real estate and winning, one of the great things about it is that, it gives you so many opportunities to win. So many opportunities to win. Win in getting the call that a client wants to sell or transact. Win giving the pitch, getting awarded the business, signing the contract, closing the deal. Lots of wins in all that. And that's a great thing. So I think we're all very fortunate that we're in this business that, from my perspective, is really the ultimate meritocracy. You get out of it what you put into it. So I'm going to share a little bit about my experience at Knakal with you. It was a firm I started mentioned to Ken, I started at CB, met Paul Massey. At the time, CB had about 60 brokers leasing office space, about 20 in the investment sales department, 20 in the retail leasing department. 4 people were in the investment sales department. I wanted to sell buildings. There were 3 guys with 20 years of experience, and Paul Massey, who had just gotten out of a 1-year training program. I show up the first day, the boss says, "Hey, follow Massey around. He just got out of a training program. He knows where the coffee machine is. He can tell you what's what here." So day 2 on the job, Paul and I are having lunch, and it was clear the guys with 20 years of experience weren't going to spend a lot of time with us. So we said casually, "Look, let's just work together, split everything 50-50, see how it goes." And that was the start of a 30-year partnership. So you talk about serendipity and luck. But 2 years later, Paul and I were made the heads of that investment sales department. So the guys with 22 years of experience at that point were now working for us, which was great. But we left CB in November of 1988 to start Massey Knakal. And we started the company based on the premise of having a territory system. Again, we talk about market knowledge. And back then, we implemented a geographic territory system similar to the way residential brokers farm. They call it farming. You know, a residential broker work one neighborhood, go to every house, knock on doors. So we did the same thing. We each took a little section of town, got to know every property owner on the block, and really knew what was going on. So it created a way for us to specialize, differentiate, and it was a competitive advantage. So we had sold 3 buildings. I remember we pitched a building on 58th Street, and we met with the owner. They said, "Oh, well, we've talked to other brokers that have sold so many buildings. You guys are new. You've only sold a couple of buildings." We sold 3 buildings. One was down the block, one was across the street, one was right next door to you. We know this market better than anybody, and we can be a better advocate for you in terms of convincing a buyer to pay more for your property. And that got traction. People like that. We had an expertise, and we were young, and we were just starting out, but we had an expertise because we knew that marketplace better than anybody. So, P.S., we started the company with just 2 of us, grew the company to 250 people in 4 offices, ran the business for 26 years and 46 days. From 2001, when started tracking sales volume in New York, from 2001 to 2014, we were at the top of the sales activity chart every year. And by the end of 2014, we had sold 3x times the number of properties as the number 2 firm. So we had a dominant market share. Again, 250 people, 4 offices in New York. And we sold the business to Cushman at the end of 2014 for $100 million. So how did we do that, right? I think the several things. It was the environment that we created and the people that we had, I think, is what allowed for the success. And so we had a lot of people come and go over the years. And I'll tell you, the qualities that we saw in people that really made a difference, that we thought was predictive of success, are they passionate about the business? Do they love it? Passion is so important because no matter how good you are, you're going to have hard times. But it's the folks who are passionate that will fight through those tough times and move on to succeed. So we always look for passion. We also look for competitiveness. Is this a competitive business or what? Right? So we looked for things like team sports, where there was competition and working with people. We looked for excellence, editor of the school newspaper, captain of the debating team, something where people exhibited excellence in a competitive environment. And that proved to be a good indication of how someone was going to do in the business. And we looked for people who had that desire. Right? So much of what we do is based on desire that we have to win, and discipline. And we'd always ask people, why do you want this? And determining why people want to succeed, why their desire is there, that's really tough, because there's desire to get the job, but there's also desire to perform well at the job. And those are two very different things sometimes. So we set up this culture, and when we had our HR folks interview people, we always told them, look, you could look at candidates, and as good as you think they are, if you don't think you would want to go have a beer with them or go have lunch with them, don't give them a job. And what it did is it created a culture and an environment where if one of our people got married, there'd be 40 or 50 Massey Knakal people there. And 20 guys would get a beach house in the Hamptons for the summer together. And 4 or 5 couples would go on vacation to the Caribbean together. And that was something that I'm really, really proud of, right? If I look at everything that we did, the way that we encouraged people to feel like they were working with their friends, the environment, everybody was pulling for each other. And that was something that I thought was a great outcome, a great way that we were able to succeed. And we also focused intently on training. We invested in our people, taught them the business well. And the thing that I'm probably most proud of everything that we've done is today in New York City, there are 22 investment sales companies or divisions of companies that are run by people who learn the business at our shop. So I haven't heard anything like that in the marketplace, and it's something I'm very, very proud of. So how did all that happen? It was a system where we focused on that training. We wanted people to become market experts. We wanted them to work together. And it was something where we looked to motivate people, to let them motivate themselves, which I think people, the motivation is either within them or not within them. And so much of what we do, we've learned so much at this conference, but the difference between knowing what to do and actually doing it is such an extraordinary difference. And Rod talks about this. Didn't you write a book called Knowing Isn't Doing? Right? So the thing that we have to all remember is to actually do it. To actually do it, right? And I think that if you, I've heard a definition of hell, and hell is your last day on earth. The person you've become meets the person you could have been, right? And the biggest lie in sales is that, oh, there's nothing I can do. Oh, the market's bad. Oh, I got unlucky on this deal. It's out of my control. You can do great things. And I think a good leader, and you're all leaders. You're leaders whether you own a firm or you're running a team or you're just working on your own. You are a leader. And to give positive feedback and encouragement and induce people or motivate them to act is so important, so that you don't have that hellish day. You have to act. You have to take the time to do things. And it's one of the great things that we have, one of the things that separates us from animals, 2 things. One is that we can imagine the future. And you can imagine what your future is going to be, and you can work towards that. And the other great thing that we have is free will. Right? So free will means that you can decide to tangibly and profoundly change your life at any minute. Right now, right this very second, you can decide that you are going to do the things that you've always wanted to do to be better at what your craft is. You could decide to be a better husband, a better wife, a better son, a better friend, a better wife, a better mother, better daughter. You can decide to do anything. You can decide, hey, you know what? I'm finally going to get to the gym. I'm finally going to quit smoking. I'm finally going to eat right. I'm going to do the things that I know I should be doing to succeed. And so if I could leave you with any thought, you have the ability to change everything right now. Just make up your mind to do it. Thought is a powerful, powerful thing. So get out there and do it. Mike, you have a question? Biggest challenge probably was, and could somebody get me a bottle of water? Um, biggest challenge, I think, was getting through the S&L crisis. Thanks. I think getting through the S&L crisis, it was bad. Nobody was buying. The volume of sales was down tremendously, and we had no money. Actually, it was a blessing in disguise for Massey Knakal, and I'll tell you that Paul and I actually wanted to start the business 2 years before we did. And thank goodness that we didn't, because we started in November of '88, our burn rate was only about $15,000 a month at that time. Had we started in '86, our burn rate might have been $25,000 or $30,000, and it was $15,000 a month. We got to a point in 1990 when we had $15,000 in the bank, and we had no deals under contract, and we're like, what the heck do we do? So we said, well, we can pay $5,000 a month for the next 3 months for our most expensive bills. We could pay all the bills this month and see what happens. We did think very briefly about going to Atlantic City and putting it all on black. Fortunately, we didn't do that. But you know what? We both said, we have great credit. Let's go to every bank. We got a $2,000 card from this bank, $4,000 card from that bank. And we ran the company on credit cards. We attained an aggregate of $60,000 in credit cards. We ran the business on credit cards for about 3 years. And it was really, really challenging. And I think part of it was that it just didn't know any better at the time. Like we kept thinking we're going to succeed. We kept doing the thing, making our calls, doing our, the stuff that we had always done. But that was probably the most challenging time. Was basically living on credit cards for a while, and it was really hard. But sure enough, 1993 came around, and we did actually get to the point where we had all $60,000 taken down on the credit lines, and had no money in the bank. And we went to visit one of our clients who was a very, very wealthy guy. And we had done a couple of deals with him, and we said, hey, we need a $75,000 loan. Would you lend us the 75 grand? And he looks at us, I really like you boys. I'll give you the 75,000, but I want 50% of the stock in your business. So we said, well, thanks for the offer. And we walk back to the office with our chins on our chests, and we're like, what the heck are we going to do? And Paul's stepfather-in-law owned a mortgage brokerage business out in New Jersey. So we're like, let's go ask Jack. His name was Jack Holler. Let's go ask Jack for the loan. We'll offer him 25% of the stock in the business. So we go out, talk to Jack, offer him ask for the $75,000 loan with 25% of the stock. And he says, guys, I'm going to give you the 75 grand. I don't want the stock in the business because someday you're going to be very successful and you're going to regret that you gave me the stock. So unbelievable. So we named our Salesman of the Year award after Jack and gave that out for 26 years in his honor. But sometimes you get lucky. That was another lucky thing that happened. But that was probably, that period of time was really, really tough. But then in '93, market came around, banks started hiring. We got so much bank work, and the company started to take off. And that was a very, very tough time, no doubt about it. And I'll also share with you, just or if we have some time, various inflection points that happened over the course of the company that I think you might find interesting. One was at 9/11, we had 21 people. So from November of '88 to September of 2001, we grew from 2 to 21. And at that time, New York was in a tough spot. A lot of companies were downsizing, letting people go. Great quality people were out of work. And Paul and I really believed that the market was going to come back, that New York was tough, it was going to come back strong. Up to that point, we were both interviewing everybody ourselves. So we said, you know what, let's go out, hire a director of HR, and hire all these people. And we went from 21 to 2 years later, 150 people. And the market came roaring back. We had, at that time also, we opened up an office in Queens, we opened up in Brooklyn, and that was an interesting inflection point for us too, because we had this territory system where we started out with Paul in one territory, I was in the territory next door, and then we put somebody to the north of us and somebody to the south, and we grew like a jigsaw puzzle. And when we had all the territories filled, we're like, in territories in Manhattan, we said, what do we do now? Do we do office leasing? Do we do debt? Do we lease stores? And we're like, we don't know anything about those businesses. We know how to sell buildings. Let's go out to Queens. So we opened up an office in Queens. A couple of years later, we opened up an office in Brooklyn. And this was way before it was cool to be in the outer boroughs in New York. But then when the market came back in 2004, we were way ahead of everybody else who then started to get into the outer boroughs. And that was a big inflection point, and hiring all those people was an inflection point. And then we had another inflection point in 2011 when we got to a place where we had all the territories in New York City filled. And again, we're faced with the same decision. What do we do? Do we get into office leasing? Do we do debt? Do we go to Philadelphia, Chicago, Boston, Washington, D.C.? What do we do? First time around, we decided to increase the geography. This time around, we said, you know what? If we go to Chicago, we're going to have to spend time explaining to people who we are and then what we can do for them. So we have these long-term relationships with so many people in New York. Let's get into the debt business. And, you know, we were selling about 500 buildings a year at that point. And the stapling financing onto those sale transactions was a great business, and it took off. Our first year doing debt, we did about $300 million in debt. Second year, $800 million, $1.3 billion in the third year, and that was the year we sold. And also, I will share with you, talk about luck, and I'm a big believer in luck. I think the harder you work, the luckier you get, but I think you have to have luck on your side. People think that we were very, thoughtful about selling the business at what was absolutely the top of the market. And I will tell you, 2014 was the perfect time to sell the business. In 2014, 5,534 buildings sold in New York City. That was an all-time record by more than 10%, and still is a record. But we made that decision in 2007. 2007, we had expanded, had a lot of people, the market was doing great. Big national firm came to us, offered us $50 million. And we're like, wow, that's a lot of money. So we were talking to them about it, and for a variety of reasons, that transaction didn't happen. But what became very obvious to us is that when we did sell the business, we'd be on 5-year contracts with the company that bought us. And so we looked ahead and we said, well, in 2015, Paul will be turning 55, and the perception of these contracts is that they'll be much more valuable if we're in our 50s than if we're in our 80s. So in 2007, we said in 2014, if the market doesn't stink, we should think about selling, because we formed the business with the idea of one day selling it. So 2014 comes around, market's doing great. We hired an investment bank. And it just was, in hindsight, it was the perfect time, but we didn't consciously make a decision to sell in 2014. In 2014, we did that back in 2007, and it just happened to work out well. Anyway, you guys have been great. Thank you so much.
Please welcome back to the stage, Ken Ashley.
There we go. Listen, you're a great pal. You're a great friend of CREi Summit. And I want to give you a CREi Summit water bottle.
Oh, I was hoping I was going to get one of these.
So you can put this on your desk, and we, just like DeLee, we can be in your office all the time.
Awesome.
You're a great
Love it.
leader. Thank you very
Thanks,
much, Bob.
Kev.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you. All right, give him another round of applause.